give a type of money that can only be spent for a specific number of reasons. And some worry about that state control or whatever. But like in this particular narrow use case, you want to give checks to individuals to get the economy moving again. Yeah. So if you think of programmable money that expires if you don't spend it.
Uber, Bitcoin, self-driving cars. Combine those three together and you have the self-owning taxi. A car that is a corporation that owns itself, pays for the car lease, the car insurance, and the gasoline from the revenues it makes, giving passengers a ride, and there's not a single human involved in that matter.
So all that said, if you were in the chair today, would you have approved it?
Well, look, I'm not there, and I'm not going to have that kind of, I do this, he would do that. What I have said is, as this has developed, it is clear that Bitcoin is not a security. It is clear that Bitcoin is something that retail investors want access to, that institutional investors want access to. And importantly, some of our most trusted providers who are fiduciaries or have duties of best interest want to provide this product to the retail public. So I think, as Anthony said, an approval isn't inevitable. The dichotomy between a futures product and a cash product can't go on forever. And so I think that's the path we're on.
So if it's inevitable, Jay, then what is the SEC deferring? Why is the SEC deferring the applications? Are they looking for other ways, other grounds in which to try and reject these applications? And what is the case to be made when there are, futures ETFs for Bitcoin that are investors safer buying a Bitcoin futures ETF than a Bitcoin cash ETF?
What I think we are finding out is that for a long time, and I held this view, let me be clear, and I held the view that we were uncertain whether cash trading was so easily manipulatable that retail folks should not have access to it. There are now large institutions with surveillance mechanisms who are coming in and saying, no, that's not the case. We can rely on the efficacy of the cash market to a sufficient extent where we believe this is an appropriate product. That's a shift. Now, the SEC has been given time by the DC Circuit to reassess and perhaps come up with other reasons. I don't see those. Maybe there will be some, but I don't see those.
So what's your assessment then of what Chair Gensler is doing? Why if everybody in the industry is saying it's inevitable and he's just going to look for ways to reject the applications when there's a futures ETF already on the market, what's the point here?
Well, let me say this. We'll give them time. There's a roughly 45-day time period, both in the DC Circuit and on the deferral of these applications. In the relative scheme of things, and I think Anthony was he didn't say this directly, but in the relative scheme of things, 45 days is a short amount of time. And I do expect that we'll have progress on this going forward.
Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And I come back with that video just to make you think.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Support this great content by hitting the Cash App and by joining the Patreon.
And guys, we have Jay Clayton now saying Bitcoin is not a security. We couldn't hear a word from him when he was in charge of the SEC. And guys, don't forget, he was in that meeting with the FDIC. He knows exactly what's going on. They're trying to destroy these small and medium-sized banks, so only the big banks are left. Because with this new digital economy, there's no way that these banks can survive. And then we had Pump talking about the power of stable coins. And guys, with all this inflation in the emerging markets, all these countries relying on the dollar, it's destroying their fiat currency. So therefore, they turn to stable coins. And guys, we know that word is there for a reason. They want the masses to run into these stable coins, but little do the masses know this money is going to be programmable, telling them what, when, and how to buy, and they have 3 to 6 months to spend it or poof, it's gone. And guys, we already know we're getting a Bitcoin ETF because we heard from Larry Fink, and that's why I play it in every single video. The key to tokenizing the stock market is through ETFs. And we had Pump, Brown Nose, and Gary Gensler says that he has a tough job. Guys, we know Gary Gensler is just kicking this regulation can down the road. So therefore, the fourth industrial revolution rises in the emerging markets, and we're going to see the fall of America to Babylon 2.0, along with the United States world reserve currency. Yes, the dollar is not going anywhere, but that world power is over. We're going to see the digital yuan rise, backed by that digital SDR. And remember, the crypto teacher told you, because he knows when it comes to the NWO, it's all planned out. You have a wonderful day.
See you this morning. A couple things. First and foremost, are you surprised that the SEC deferred after the prior ruling?
Good morning, Scott. And no, I'm not surprised. The deferral of the applications and the additional time period as a result of that deferral doesn't line up perfectly, but it lines up pretty well with the time for action in the D.C. Circuit, on the D.C. Circuit's action to say your reasoning for not approving a spot Bitcoin ETF is inadequate. So we now have two periods of time that are almost coterminous for the SEC to take its next action.
You know, Anthony Pompliano, who was with us within the last half hour, is about as big of an advocate for crypto assets as I think you'd find anywhere, without question. He said that Mr. Gensler has a, quote, impossible job. And he sounded sympathetic towards the idea that although he thought this was inevitably going to happen, that protecting investors weighs heavily in all of this as well. How would you assess that comment?
I caught your interview with Anthony, and I thought he did a remarkable job of synthesizing a lot of what is going on at the moment, but also what has gone on over time. And the job for the SEC, has been a challenging one. Crypto is a technology. Bitcoin is one manifestation of that technology providing a product. When crypto came to our retail markets, many people used crypto to develop products that were clearly non-compliant with our securities laws. They raised money in effectively public offerings without going through the rigors of public registration. And the SEC had to tamp down on that. And we did. Now the SEC has to deal with the lines between securities offerings, securities trading, non-securities offerings, non-securities tradings, and things like stablecoin, which Anthony mentioned, and have clearly shown promise. So it is a job that is challenging, but it's one that the SEC and let me point this out, many other federal financial regulators have to take on.
Sound, admittedly, I'm kind of surprised. You sound a little more sympathetic towards Mr. Gensler, as maybe I would have expected, because many who share your passion and advocacy for Bitcoin have been much more harsh towards him.
At the end of the day, we can yell and scream, we can argue, name call, do all the things that people do, but we still have to work together, right? At the end of the day, the regulators are always going to be the regulators. And so my thought process is if we spend our time more focused on educating and kind of trying to bridge that gap, get them to understand why this technology is important, how it's already helped quite a bit of people, that's probably a more productive use of energy and time than it would be to sit and just yell and scream at each other. Because at the end of the day, the yelling and the screaming just gets people to dig their heels in, and then people don't want to work together, right? But my belief is that a Bitcoin ETF will be approved in the United States of America. It will lead to billions and billions of dollars of inflows. At the same time, I think that regulators are having to get up to speed. They're getting educated. And the more that they learn, the more they realize the technology is not going away. I mean, stable coins is like a story that I think regulators are kind of scratching their head around. We've seen $11 trillion of transaction volume settled with stable coins. That's the same transaction volume as Visa. Right? So when you start to think about this, you're like, wait a minute, nobody uses that stuff except for the dollar on blockchain is used just as much as Visa is used. That is a mind-blowing statistic where regulators, technologists, and frankly, politicians all have to get together and decide how are we going to use this technology? Because if we don't do it here in the United States, people internationally are going to continue to use this. And we're seeing international usage and adoption of these technologies explode. Does America want to be a leader or do we want to be a follower? Historically, we've been a leader, so let's go lead.
let's go back and assume that a Bitcoin ETF is approved. How do you think about the trades? We saw initially Coinbase go up, but you sort of wondered, do you need something like a Coinbase if you can buy an ETF on any exchange, on your Schwab account, for instance? So how do you think about it?
So, we're an investor in Coinbase, have been for a long time. And I think that if you're a retail investor and you wanted exposure to Bitcoin over the last 2, 3, 5 years, you probably went and figured out a way to do it, right? And so I don't think that there's a ton of inflows that are going to be happening from retail investors. I do think, though, that sovereign wealth funds or very large institutions, they're not going on Coinbase and buying, spot Bitcoin, right? And so I think that that's where the ETF inflows could happen. I think Coinbase has done a fantastic job. They've onboarded more people to Bitcoin than any other company in the country or in the world. And if you look at, by being a public company, what they've really done is they've held the flag and said, look, we want to be a regulated institution. We want to be a big brand. I think they're doing a fantastic job.
What did you make of this whole thing?
I don't think everyone was really surprised with the delays yesterday, the 6 delays. Gives them another 45 days to kind of figure it out. One of the important things about the SEC's loss in that lawsuit was the judge didn't say, hey, you have to approve the ETF. They just said that you have to go back and figure out, are you going to approve or deny it on other kind of causes? And so, look, we have futures-based ETFs. I think we will get a spot Bitcoin ETF. The question is when. One of the things that people aren't talking about, though, is this ETF is going to be a demand shock, right? There is going to be assets that flow into this industry when that occurs, but closer and closer we get to the halving, it will coincide with a supply shock in that halving, and I think that we could see a repeat of 2020 where we go up quite significantly in price if that occurs.
Wow. Let's sort of back up. In terms of the price action in response to the overturning of the decision, we saw all of those gains wiped out. And you said that it's sort of not a surprise. So, I mean, why did we see those gains in the first place? And what is so the play right now is to be long, is what you're saying.
I think that, Bitcoin's really interesting. It was up like 80% to start the year. It's now down to about 60% up since the start of the year. In July and August, it was down. September's historically been a pretty bad month for Bitcoin. So you get some of those like seasonality type stuff that are playing in here as well. But people who pay attention every single day to the crypto industry, they're not surprised. I think what's happening, though, is you've had a kind of a turning of the holder base, right? You used to have all crypto native people who held Bitcoin. Now you're starting to get more Wall Street people, kind of retail investors. And so those people who don't pay attention 24/7, 365, they're probably a little surprised, but the crypto native folks, they kind of expected this.
Going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go, but clearly we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology, and I worry that that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is a very clear sign.
And so we'll import Chinese-based CBDC technology. So it's going to be CBDC in a box provided to you by the People's Bank of China.
But every stock, every bond, every currency, every commodity, every piece of art, every private business, every piece of real estate will eventually be a token on a blockchain, an entry on a ledger, permanent and immutable. We will have truth instead of trust. And we will save over $7 trillion a year. 6 to 8% of global GDP is wasted by the friction of the trust industry that's necessary when you have dual entry accounting. With triple entry accounting, which is what a blockchain is, we get rid of all of that friction. It's a beautiful future.
Like what you see in China and their social credit scoring systems, right? If we get identity wrong, it could be a tool to enslave humanity. And if we get it right, it could be a tool to liberate humanity. And as an American, I'm obviously rooting for the one that's on the side of freedom.
Bitcoin is an international asset. And also, I do believe the role of crypto is, it's digitizing gold.
I actually believe this technology is going to be very important. Look at it. We have been part of the huge revolution in investing through ETFs. We believe that ETFs will be changing the whole way we invest. Many people still use it as a means, people are investing it for indexing. No, the majority of people who are putting money in in ETFs are active investors that are buying exposure. The entire bond market is being transformed as we talk right now. I believe the next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenization of securities. We will, and if we can have that distributed ledger that we know every beneficial owner, every beneficial seller, we all have our code of who's buying, who's selling, instantaneous settlement. And think about it, it changes the whole ecosystem.
Cryptoteacher and the New World Order book, plus the 3 kids books. It's time to re-educate. Also, new to cryptos, Coinbase, Bitrue, Binance. Do not forget book links and crypto links are in the description. The stock channel, guys. Don't forget to go like, subscribe, spread everywhere. You have your Kobo, your chip stocks, your banking, your gaming. While everybody's sitting at home, get on stocks, the Seaver, the biotech stocks. And while everybody's at home wishing they were still getting that free money, what are they doing? Drinking and smoking weed. Don't forget about those stocks, and you have a wonderful day. The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Steve Jobs. And guys, you know I truly believe in this. When you look at the New World Order, they're the storytellers. And that's the reason why I wrote my New World Order book. But guys, now it's time to change the current generation. And I wrote 3 kids books. You know I love the Trinity because I understand the power that's in it. So I have 3 books. We have an opportunity to change the generation, to educate, not just me, but I want to show you that I take action on a daily basis. And I want you to take action on a daily basis. Whether it's your job, whether it's in your community, we have an opportunity right now to educate the masses. I posted this on my Twitter account. Please share, but this is a short clip of the 3 books. There's going to be a clothing line and action figures. Please get these books for your kids, nephews, cousins, friends, so therefore we can start the re-education now. Because as we see, the 4th Industrial Revolution foundation is definitely here. Robots, algorithms, drones, taking humanity out the picture. We have to re-educate. But let's get into the video.
Part 1. King Joshua and Grandma Tam save the village. Part 2. King Joshua and Grandma Tam save New York from COVID-33. Part 3. King Joshua and Grandma Tam goes to China.
It's mandatory to get part 1, part 2, and part 3 of this series. It's time to re-educate Generation Z.